Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I want to talk about gay men and the emotional benefits of kink play. So, as a gay men's specialist, psychotherapist, and coach for over 30 years now, 32 in 2024, as well as a gay men's life, career, and relationship coach, and an ASEX certified sex therapist, American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, I've always enjoyed providing content like this in support of gay men's well-being that is generally not found in many or any other locations, including my gay men's therapy colleagues who are newer to the field. So today, I'd like to share about a topic that fits this, and that is a discussion of the benefits of kink, sex, play for gay men. So as we all know, gay men in general, and their sexuality in particular, meet with heterosexism and homophobia in a mainstream society to a greater or lesser degree, depending on when and where we're looking at. More progressive world cities like Berlin, Amsterdam, and many others in Europe, or in the United States, San Francisco, Los Angeles, West Hollywood, Palm Springs, Wilton Manors, etc., are more safe and enjoyable for gay men and their relationships, while many other locations in the world are oppressive to the point of murdering their own gay male citizens, among others, such as in the Middle East or in the African nations, some of them. But anywhere gay men face oppression, they deserve to have their rights and their dignity affirmed, including their right to an adult consensual sexuality, even a sexuality that we broadly label kink practices, which are not limited to gay men, certainly not, but are generally considered more secret than vanilla sex. So, I've talked about this before in other episodes, but kink play can involve power dynamics, the dominant and the submission or the dom-sub, fetishes for various kinds of equipment, fabrics like leather or rubber or furry materials, costumes like cosplay, or body parts that are especially eroticized, or other ways of emotional and physical stimulation between two or more people designed to celebrate the erotic and to share erotic energy. So in this discussion, I'd like to offer some highlighted ways that specifically gay men's kink play can serve as an emotional enhancement and to support mental health, ultimately. So despite sex-negative voices that label all kink play sick or exploitive or whatever for straight people as well as everyone else, the educated person, especially credentialed physicians, mental health professionals, certified sex therapists, certified sex educators, other kinds of sex advocates, knows that while consensual or non-consensual or abusive practices can happen in any room of the house, not just the bedroom, kink sexual play gets stigmatized out of proportion to other interpersonal issues. And there's a problem of sex negativity that comes from religious conservatism, or it comes from gay men being a cultural minority. Who knows where it comes from? We just know that there's a lot of it. So most of the criticisms of kink sexual play come from sex negative voices who kind of obtusely apply their own views wrapped in religious moralism or societal expectations on others who actually have a right to their own private autonomy. When investigated further, many sex-negative voices are hypocrites who are indulging themselves quite robustly, truth be known, but they position themselves to appear sanctimonious for social status or political gain or cynical strategies to earn money, like televangelists or right-wing politicians. The harms that come from sex-negative judgmentalism and moralism and attempts to undermine, thwart, control, humiliate kink players are numerous. But despite this, kinkers are gonna kink, straight, gay, all orientations, all genders, if they so choose to express their sexuality in these ways. So advocates like me for sexual and gender minorities assert that people have a right to privacy in their sexual expression with other consenting, keyword, adults. So it's from this perspective, and by many years of academic and clinical experience supporting mental health and sexuality of gay men, that I invite this exploration to discuss with you to consider the benefits of kink play, just various ones, and in no particular order. Let's look at number 1, reclaiming our bodies. Kink play asserts that not only do we have a right to adult human sexuality, but we have a right to assert dominion over our own bodies if it's not harming someone else. When we approach all sexual acts, we are reclaiming our bodies in the name of our own personal rights, even if that means snatching them away from those people who would try to control us. Kink play specifically asserts the idea that our bodies are ours to explore sensation with, that part of living, such as breathing, eating, drinking, peeing, pooping, sleeping, protection from heat and cold, is sexual expression and play. And it is up to us, each of us, to own our own bodies and then decide what we choose to do with them, especially in the context of interpersonal sexual acts. So number 2 of the benefits is affect regulation. Affect is just kind of in mental health, we consider that the expression or the manifestation of mood. But it's also about controlling our emotional relationship to what's going on around us. We can have a bright affect when we're happy. We can have a subdued affect when we're sad or depressed. And part of it also is about our emotional behavior. So when we say number 2 is a benefit of affect regulation as a top, or a dom, or dominant, is one of the benefits of kink play. This is especially so in the traditional dom-sub dynamic, where you're exploring these roles. So for most people, they will identify primarily as a dominant partner or a submissive partner, although many people identify as what we call a switch or a versatile as well. And when we explore the dominant role, we are experimenting with the idea of what it's like to assert consensual control of one another, to erotically stimulate them. And it's an opportunity for affect regulation, which we need in life in general, because affect regulation is kind of just another term for keeping yourself together. For example, when we are in acute grief due to the loss of a loved one, we might use affect regulation, which is kind of a fancy term for emotional control or composure, to be able to make funeral arrangements or to greet guests at a funeral. We might use affect regulation in public to contain our anger when someone else out on the road causes a traffic accident that hurts us or our car. So affect regulation, when you're a dom, means that you're asserting control over your sub-partner, inflicting a form of playful sadism or pain, but you're doing so judiciously in a way to stimulate your sub-partner, but you're holding back just enough with what mental health professionals sometimes call the observing ego, watching yourself in the back of your own mind, that you're not actually hurting your partner in a negative way, even if you're exploring things like impact play, such as using a leather flogger on the bare behind of your partner. But you might also tie or restrain your sub-partner with rope or leather straps or handcuffs in an erotic bondage, but not in such a way that you would be dangerously restricting air or circulation. But we might be exploring indulging what Carl Jung, Jung, called our shadow side. Being aggressive, controlling, and even a bit sadistic, but in a consensual sexual kink play context, can be a good thing. Because this can have implications for real life for us. When we practice affect regulation of our dominant, aggressive, or leadership traits in the context of kink play, we might also be practicing affect regulation that we can apply when we are doing other things that require direction or leadership, like disciplining our children, or when we are guiding and supervising in the professional workplace to guide the performance of a subordinate employee, or when we're teaching students, or when we are in any situation that requires leading or directing others and being in control of a certain agenda and asserting our point of view toward a goal, such as running a business or in social justice advocacy or in politics or creativity, such as directing a play. So we might be drawing on a form of the sadism side when we are engaged in competition in sports, or representing a company selling products or services against the competition, or when we are participating in activism against a political enemy or a social injustice in unjust laws. So Carl Jung basically implied that when we acknowledge and manage our shadow self, we are enhancing our mental health and functioning. Comics are a great pop culture lesson in this. When a benevolent superhero has an equal and opposite malevolent personality, such as when Superman is exposed to red kryptonite, or Reverse Flash in the Flash comics, or the villain Two-Face from Batman, or the original depictions of the duality, the Two-Faced Janus in mythology, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in literature, from the late 19th century, or the evil twin trope that's used in, daytime TV soap operas or sitcoms where the same actor is playing two different parts. So exploring the duality of light and dark in all of us can help us to know ourselves on a deeper level, that self-knowledge, and get the benefit of that self-awareness and self-knowledge in kink play, in addition to being a part of sexuality with our primary partner or with others, can be great. And it's ultimately a safe way to explore these aggressive impulses and how to regulate those and to apply aggressive or dominant impulses in a safe way and in a fun way. So number 3, similarly, is affect regulation as a bottom or as a sub or subordinate. So when we explore a submissive or sub role, we're practicing affect regulation to be accommodating, servile, passive, selfless, and even masochistic, receiving pain in a paradox to receive pleasure. When we subjugate ourselves to a purpose, in kink play, the fun of serving our dom or master, we are exploring the fun of stimulation, much like extreme sports like hang gliding or skydiving or even riding a roller coaster, where we're inducing the thrill of the theories of physics with elements like velocity and gravity and centrifugal force of what that does to our bodies. It's fun. So when we pursue and adopt forces being applied to us, like strapping in tight to the roller coaster seat or submitting to the erotic whims of our dom, we are practicing regulating what it's like to relinquish our control. So the implications for real life for this might be those who derive satisfaction from living a life of service, such as domestic staff, a nanny or an au pair, people in the military, people in civil service, in government, national royal families and their sense of duty and charity in different countries, volunteer or service corps, like the Peace Corps, teaching, and even the helping professions, like social work and mental health or medicine or nursing. So kink play can also offer a balancing, a yin and yang to our personal lives that contrasts with our primary public role. For example, a busy executive with many direct reports in the workplace who feels the demand of constant leadership might feel refreshed to indulge in his or her submissive side in recreational and personal and sexual life, going off and playing with a dom or a dominatrix or in their free time. So similarly, someone who is in service to others in their work as a matter of routine might enjoy exploring their dominant side when they're off the clock. Number 4 is refining our understanding of consent. So kink play offers us the opportunity to be attuned to others in more nuanced ways. There can be complex discussions of, that issue of consensual non-consent, meaning they're inviting a total domination by another. But in the context of a kink play scene or setting that's been prepared beforehand, such as defining a role play of being kidnapped or otherwise subdued by another, and it's still voluntary. So when we discuss kink play parameters and limits and safe words that can take you out of the moment or kind of break character, almost like you're an actor breaking character in a play, we are honoring the duality that others have a right to give or withhold consent to us, and we have a right to give or withhold consent to others. The recent emphasis lately on addressing the ills of non-consensual sexual situations, such as date rape on college campuses, sexual harassment in the workplace, or the rights of women, especially overall and globally, like the hashtag #MeToo movement about sexual harassment in the workplace, have brought issues and dilemmas about the concept of personal consent, especially sexually, to the fore. With the social zeitgeist that the harms of non-consensual sexual battery have gone on for far too long, unabated, and to great individual and collective harm to the human spirit and society. So part of the modern movement, like Me Too, is to bring awareness to the harms of non-consensual situations and do something to try and mitigate all of that damage. So we tend to think of the harms of people violating others' consent as being only about women and underage people like children. But as a men's specialist psychotherapist, especially gay men's specialist, I've worked with a number of male sexual assault victims. And there are still a lot of people who think that doesn't really exist, and that is perhaps the most invalidating and misandrist aspect of that, of all sexual assaults or violations of consent, which is the critic's view that there's no such thing as adult male victims of sexual assault. There are by perpetrators of all genders. And then we have the old homophobic view that a little boy or young male adolescent who has been sexually abused or sexually assaulted or raped by an older, even if by a little bit, male perpetrator will make them gay, which is the Republicans in America and other conservative bigots view worldwide. And this is not true. Sexual abuse or assault by a male perpetrator does not make a boy gay any more than abuse by a female perpetrator makes a boy straight. Because sexual orientation and your status as a survivor or victim are independent variables. But sometimes perpetrators target nascent gay boys or gay boys who are not yet sexually mature as adolescents or adults, and they prey on their secrecy or their vulnerability to attack them, which is just part of the sadistic nature in a negative way of the perpetrator. That's a non-consensual sadism, as opposed to the dominant sadism in kink play. Very important difference there that critics get confused. So there's recent research by a trans woman attorney, Kristen Braude, Brode, Kristen Braude, of Instagram fame. And she's been keeping statistics for about 18 months now on people arrested for sex crimes against children and doing Instagram stories and reels about this to educate the public. And the vast majority, she has found in her data, have been Republicans or clergy or teachers or youth care workers, with only about 1/16 of 1% being trans perpetrators and absolutely zero drag queens. And yet, look at the crap we have in the United States about trying to say, drag queens who read stories to children are groomers, and people in Congress are groomers. When, so a part of the discussion about grave violations of consent, especially regarding children's legal consent or statutory rape, is that the real proportion of perpetrators goes underreported, and a hateful bigotry against trans women and drag queens is erroneously emphasized to devastating results, with laws oppressing them and taking away their rights. And it's all for a political manipulation by Republicans and bigot religious conservatives in the name of, parental control or parents' rights. And it's no such thing. It's just a negative oppression of civil rights. And it's a problem because violations of consent are a bad social problem that needs to be addressed, much, much better because there's too much of it. But not really much is being done to prevent or reduce the prevalence of sexual abuse and other non-consensual ills, or to intervene or enforce where it's needed. And I always say, fight the real enemy with this. There is a problem that needs to be addressed, but it's not going to be solved by oppressing drag queens or, keeping trans people out of the restroom that correlates with their gender identity. But all of that is kind of a separate psychosocial or political issue that, has nothing to do with the discussion of consent and even the more complex consensual non-consent in adult kink play, sexual expression. So let's get back to that. In adult kink play, sexual expression, consent becomes a very conscious commodity and creates a setting where the nuances of consent to do something or not to do something can be explored. Kink play is a form of interpersonal sharing, profoundly sensitive interpersonal communication, and an opportunity for intimacy with someone else, usually a trusted romantic partner, such as a spouse or life partner, but it can be a stranger in kind of a fraternal way, in dyads of two or in groups of three or more, in a group kink sex scene. So number 5 of the benefits of kink play can be exposure therapy for trauma. So this is another topic I think that really needs its own separate discussion about how kink play and playing with dominance and submission dynamics can actually be a therapeutic healing experience for survivors of sexual assault or abuse. It's a revisiting of dominance and submission dynamics in a controlled environment where the non-consensual and negative and violent and exploitive, non-nurturing experiences from the victim or survivor get revisited to transform domination and submission dynamics into something positive and interpersonal and playful and intimate and exhilarating and refreshing and satisfying and fun. So this kind of discussion has been met with a lot of skepticism from my more conservative mental health professional colleagues. But there are other colleagues who are truly expert in this, and there's been very careful, legitimate clinical research on this, and the data have really been positive. It's like the old saying about having alcohol after a big night out and having a wee bit of the hair of the dog that bit you. It's kind of a paradox experience. A paradox is like cruel only to be kind. So therapists know that treatment intervention models that revisit a traumatic experience memory in a controlled, sensitive way can lead to healing. Other examples might be prolonged exposure therapy is an evidence-based intervention model in psychotherapy for trauma survivors. Somatic experiencing is another one you might have heard of. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, calls upon the client to remember and relive a traumatic memory with some kind of bilateral stimulation, such as following lights that go back and forth or having light taps on your shoulders or your knees, and mentally reprocessing that memory to lessen its traumatic effects and symptoms. And this is an evidence-based practice, we call, meaning it's been verified in research to have, legitimate, positive clinical outcomes. And it's a psychotherapy treatment model that was pioneered by Dr. Francine Shapiro, who developed this after taking a walk in the woods and watching the wind blow the leaves in her path, to and fro, to and fro. And while at first that sounds kind of fringe, and it's had its critics as sounding very non-scientific, but it's been repeatedly studied as a model of therapy and been shown to reduce traumatic symptoms. And it's very trendy right now. I think it's almost too trendy, where every therapist in the world seems to say, oh, EMDR, EMDR. And while it's been popularized among therapists as kind of fad with a really expensive training program to become certified in it. I think it's over $10,000. It indeed has not been shown to be a superior treatment model to the other evidence-based practice models like prolonged exposure therapy or trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. So while there is a debate among therapists on which techniques to employ in practice to help somebody who's a trauma survivor, sometimes with very, very bitter debate among professionals, the bottom line for clients recovering from trauma is what is going to reduce symptoms and help them feel better and function better in their lives. It's this idea of reclaiming your quality of life after a traumatic experience has tried to take away your self-confidence or your sense of safety or your confidence in yourself or your self-esteem. All these negative things that going through a traumatic experience can do to a person. So the use of kink play to revisit trauma and contribute to its healing is just one more tool in the arsenal of recovery from trauma therapeutically. Psychodrama would be another one, and even just old school psychodynamic therapy are also known in research to be effective. But for some survivors, their kink play is a way of reclaiming their body after someone else has victimized them with it, and reclaiming dynamics in power play, and working through a bad experience through embracing a positive one, interpersonally and sexually. Number 6 of a benefit is deepening intimacy. Another benefit of kink play is about deepening intimacy with a partner or partners, whether in a domestic romantic relationship or not. If you're going to go there using materials or fabrics or devices or toys and scenes of kink play situations, it requires a certain amount of mutual respect and trust and communication with the people you're involved in this with. So critics, or those who don't understand kink play and don't want to work to understand it, just dismiss it rather reflexively and sometimes aggressively as, ew, that's weird, that's sick, that's bad, that's wrong, that's sex addiction or whatever. They're missing an important component that anything that raises the stakes or heightens the emotion requires trust among the partners. So the public was educated, perhaps a bit crudely, with the whole 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon, the books and the movies. And this was about BDSM or kink play in the context of a heterosexual romance, and popularized more than ever before a familiarity with kink play that was seen as a fun, erotic reading for many readers, especially straight women, earning the book its nickname of mommy porn. So, while the books and the movies certainly had their critics, it makes a good point that kink play involves a profound trust and communication and intimacy to be attuned to what stimulates your partner erotically. Kink play requires more communication and intimacy, not less, than vanilla regular sex. And this is a common misunderstanding that kink play is somehow actually violent or harmful, or it's a compulsive reliving, acting out of a previous pathology. It's not. Things that are seriously violent and harmful are sex crimes, not adult kink play, positive consensual sexual expression. Crude minds in general tend to lack the sophistication of critical thinking skills to differentiate one thing from another because it's too much work. It hurts the brain too much and, too taxing of their short attention span or their patience to learn the nuances. But the nuances and the differences between harmful experiences and nurturing, fun, intimate kink experience, those are important differences for everybody to learn. Number 7 is revisiting and releasing shame. So kink play can help anyone to revisit and then release or overcome shame when it comes to our bodies. Many people, conservative Catholics, Mormons, Muslims, all come to mind, are brought up with such shame about the human body that it needs to be covered up in order not to cause some kind of vague harm. We're all taught overall, the genitals are our naughty parts or our dirty parts when the human body is the original natural thing. The same bare bodies that can be considered art with classical pieces like Venus de Milo or the Statue of David can be viewed as porn in modern photography or film. So there's a lot of complexity about the human body and religious dogma and societal expectations, societal customs and traditions, and so on. When we allow our bodies to indulge in kink play, we are revisiting our bodies and taking an opportunity to release any shame about them and exploring the celebratory of what our bodies are or can do to others or can be shared. And this is for any body, which includes bodies that are different or are of any shape or size or configuration or ability. I have gay male friends and colleagues with cerebral palsy or with bodies that might use prosthetic limbs as a result of an injury. And kink play can sometimes be an opportunity for people whose bodies are unfortunately shamed or criticized by bigoted others to celebrate who they are and what they can do. And it can be awkward if body difference is fetishized, such as those who are especially attracted to people with amputated limbs, or people who are especially tall or short or hairy or smooth or large or whatever. But when consent is involved, a fetish might not be a bad thing in a crass objectification, but an aesthetic appreciation that others find arousing. We can't really control what our bodies are attracted to sexually, such as with fetishes, but we do need to preserve consent and goodwill in all sexual situations. Following the 6 principles of sexual health, there's another episode on that, on the 6 principles of sexual health as applied to gay men. And these were discussed first and very, very well by my colleagues Doug Braun Harvey of San Diego, California, and Michael Brigurito of Washington, D.C. in their book called Treating Out of Control Sexual Behavior. And this is a very important book because it's an alternative to the very controversial and very problematic sex addiction model. They give a more nuanced and I think an overall better approach to sexual behavior that feels out of control or compulsive or impulsive. And so I adapted the 6 principles of sexual health as applied to gay men in a previous blog article and podcast episode. And that may be something that you're interested in because it's a good discussion. And I took what they offered and then made it more specifically apply to gay men. So number 8 of the benefits of kink play is building community. So we often refer to the fetish community or the kink community or the leather community, and there are local clubs in many cities worldwide. And for gay men, there are major convention-style events like Mid-Atlantic Leather in Washington, D.C. in January, or International Mr. Leather contest and conference in Chicago each year at Memorial Day, the end of May. Folsom Street Fair in San Francisco in September, or Darklands or Easter Berlin or Folsom Europe in Berlin in September. So Brazil has other events, and most cities of some kind of gay male gathering of leather or rubber or other kink fetishes. And there are other events that might involve more straight people or with different kinks like furries. So these are primarily social events. These are groups of people, sometimes very geographically distant friends, but they share a common interest in a fetish or kink community. I hear of many events like the Leather Social in London or Manchester or other European cities, and less so in the United States, but there are some. These groups, like any other affinity group that people might form of like minds, are a chance to build a sense of community around a common interest. When gay men in general, and I think kink players in particular, can be stigmatized, building a community of like-minded friends can be very affirming to one's sense of self, to not feel isolated or alone, but to have a sense of fraternity and community with people who share the same kinds of preferences and ideas and delights that at one time you might have thought were weird or unique to you when they're not. So, in this age of political and social polarization, any entity that promotes building a sense of community with guys having a good time together, I think is a much needed resource. Number 9 in the benefits is exploring power exchange. So, like I mentioned earlier about affect regulation among doms and subs, kink can be an opportunity for exploring power exchange between two or more people in a thrilling, recreational, sexual way. So we all have elements of dominance and submission in our daily lives. When we follow the rules of the road, we might defer or take the right of way in traffic. We are embodying a dom or sub role when we do that. In the privacy and intimacy of kink play, we explore what it means to take and to give interpersonal power in ways that might help us understand how to regulate this in our daily lives, in all interpersonal relationships. Number 10 is enhancing creativity and self-empowerment. Kink play is an opportunity to be the adult kid, to be playful in creative ways, much like how a child might play dress up with a trunk of miscellaneous old clothes and costume pieces. We can take time to follow and indulge our imaginations in ways that everyday life, like at work, often doesn't allow for, unless we work in a especially creative field, like being a staff writer on a TV show, but even that is more commercially constrained in a technique and related pressures, as I've learned from my clients in LA who do that work. So what would we do if we could select different fabrics or tools or instruments of kink play? What would be fun for us to do to another or have done to us? Often the true benefits of exploring this can only be from learn by doing. I've heard many examples from clients about trying things they didn't think perhaps they were going to like in anticipation of them, but when they actually tried them, they felt a fun sense of discovery about that experience. So kink play also provides the opportunity for self-empowerment. If we were raised with ideas that our bodies are bad or that our desires are wrong for being gay desires, kink play provides an opportunity to extend the subjective experience of our bodies in a way that can delight us in the novelty, like trying a new food that turns out to be one of our new favorites. So there are probably more emotional benefits of kink play than what we've looked at here, and there are some risks worth mentioning. The old adage about kink play was that it's best described as safe, sane, and consensual. There's some rules of the game about how to minimize harm and maximize pleasure. But it all starts with asking ourselves, what if? What if we allowed ourselves to experiment with some of the things we've heard about and sought out ways to share this? So if you would like support for this kind of self-exploration, or you need help letting go of old hurts and inhibitions that have troubled you from the past, please consider therapy or coaching. With the combination of my long 30 years experience working with gay men and gay male relationships and special certifications in things like psychiatric social work, consensual non-monogamy, and polyamorous families, which was a year-long training program I had with Sexual Health Alliance, being an ASEX certified sex therapist, there are a lot of resources that I can bring that might help you. So to get started, you can email me, ken@gaytherapyla.com. Gaytherapyla.com is the website for therapy for California residents. Or you can call or text or WhatsApp on 310-339-5778. 310-339-5778 for more information about my telehealth sessions from my home office in West Hollywood, and I'd be happy to help. More information about my therapy and coaching services is available at gaytherapyla.com, or for coaching for residents outside of California or outside of the United States, gaycoachingla.com. Also, my blog articles at gaytherapyla.com/blog. So gaytherapyla.com for California residents, whether it's LA or Northern California, wherever, California, where I'm licensed, and Gay Coaching LA, and I can talk more about the differences in those services when we talk. There's a lot of areas of overlap. There's also some important legal and ethical differences between those professional services that we always need to clarify. So if you're enjoying the podcast show here, please subscribe or rate and comment on it. Share with others if you can, whom you think might benefit from this show, or any of the other 140 episodes and counting. Let me know if there are topics that you'd like to see me cover. And if you're hearing this on the YouTube version, there's a link in the description of the show on YouTube to support the show through Patreon if you wish. And there's another support link as well through Glow. So any support you want to give for the show, if you're enjoying it, that's always appreciated. You don't have to, but it's certainly appreciated. And I also appreciate your comments and questions. So let me know if I can be of help, and I will see you next time.